Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. We're going to take a look at Camera Raw, the basics of Camera Raw. How do you get started in Camera Raw? What's Camera Raw all about? We're not going to go too into depth about making the argument for Camera Raw, but you can take it from me. If you're going to be using the Camera Raw editor, you really ought to shoot in Camera Raw. It's phenomenal. And it is much better than JPEG images, although you can open and edit JPEG and TIFF images in Camera Raw as well as Camera Raw images. But generally speaking, to use Camera Raw, you're going to want two things. Well, you're going to need two things. You're going to need the Camera Raw editor plugin, which comes standard with Photoshop. I believe it is from CS2 and on. So CS2 it comes standard, CS3 it comes standard, and any Photoshops after CS3 I'm sure it will be standard with as well. However, Photoshop CS, you can go to Adobe's website and download Camera Raw for Photoshop CS. It may not be quite as powerful as Camera Raw for CS3. In fact, I can guarantee you that it is not as powerful. But you can get it. Just go to Adobe, the support and download section of the site, and download and install it. Now, I have, as I speak, at least at this point in time, the newest version of Camera Raw. Now, we can check to see what version of Camera Raw you have. I come up here to help about plugins and choose Camera Raw, and right here at the very edge of my screen it appears Adobe Camera Raw plugin, and it's telling me I've got version 4.3.1, which is the newest version at this point in time. So 4.3.1 from Adobe is the newest Camera Raw. Now you can check to see if you need a new or a newer version of Camera Raw by going Help Updates, and there will be an update for Camera Raw on there if you need one. So that is Camera Raw. Now let's open up Bridge here and take a look at our Camera Raw image. See, we've got a Camera Raw here image which needs a little bit of work, and this JPEG image. Now, before I get started on Camera Raw, in order to get a Camera Raw image, you're going to need a camera that shoots Camera Raw images. That makes sense, doesn't it? Now, in order to check to see if your camera shoots in Camera Raw, you're going to have to look through the manual, because I can't obviously list off every single model of camera that shoots Camera Raw, but I can tell you that as far as I know, I mean, every premium DSLR, digital SLR camera with the interchangeable lenses, etc., shoot with Camera Raw. They give you the option. You can still shoot in JPEG and some of them TIFF, although TIFF is being phased out. But you can shoot in JPEG and Camera Raw with most of these cameras. And I know that some of the cameras even allow you to shoot RAW and JPEG simultaneously. So you get two versions of the same image, one RAW, one JPEG. Some people like to do that. But these DSLRs all shoot or give you the option to shoot in RAW. And you can also, a lot of the higher end point and shoot digital cameras, I own two of them, and I know both of mine shoot or give me the option to shoot in RAW, as well as my DSLR. So all of that said, you should be able to find out if your camera shoots in RAW or allows you to shoot in RAW by referring to the owner's manual. So I'm just going to bring my stuff back here, and I'm going to head over to Bridge, actually. Now, I mentioned that you need a Camera Raw image to use the Camera Raw dialog box. The Camera Raw dialog box, if you've never seen it before, well, you're about to be introduced to an entirely new experience. However, if you want to use those Camera Raw settings on an image that is not a Camera Raw image, you can use the Camera Raw image editing tools on JPEG and TIFF images. Okay, I've got this JPEG image here. This is the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, by the way, right there, crossing from New York City to Long Island, New York. And you can simply, well, I'm in Bridge. If you double-click the image, it's going to open it up in Photoshop, like so. If I right-click it, I get some more options. I can just choose Open in Camera Raw. And you're going to see this is going to open it up in the Camera Raw dialog box. And here I can mess with the exposure, I can mess with the recovery, fill light, anything I want. I can, desaturate it. But I don't want to do any of that, so I'm just going to hit Cancel and make sure those changes are not applied. Okay, it is far superior to go with a Camera Raw image if you have one. So we're going to use the Camera Raw image, and we're going to go about explaining everything we can, all of the basic stuff at least, in the Camera Raw dialog box. So with a Camera Raw image, all you have to do is double click it and Adobe Bridge Photoshop knows, hey, I need to open up the camera raw dialog box to process this image before bringing it into Photoshop. Okay, this here is actually a photo I took about a year ago, a little under a year ago, and we're going to take a look at how to correct it. You can see it needs some serious color correction and exposure. It's badly underexposed and everything like that. So, first things first though, let's take a look at the workflow information here, and that is this little link right here at the bottom of the Camera Raw dialog box. If you're using an older version of Camera Raw, I believe this is just a solid panel down here at the bottom that you can choose to collapse or close and open as you wish. But here it's just a simple link, and you can see the workflow options dialog box pops up. I'm using the Adobe RGB 1998 color space, because my camera shoots in Adobe RGB 1998. But you could use sRGB. There are also other reasons to use Color Match and Pro Photo as well. But I do not suggest that you just come through here and pick any one you want. You should look into color spaces before choosing a color space. I'm also going to leave the depth at 16 bits per channel. I'm not going to get into why I'm doing this, but I will tell you that if you're going to use 16 bits per channel, in order to export a JPEG from Photoshop, we can also save images right here from Camera Raw, so we don't have to be entirely worried about this. But if we're going to take this into Photoshop for further editing and we want to save it out as a JPEG, we're going to need to convert this back to 8 bits in Photoshop, which is very easy to do, but it's just something that you need to bear in mind so you don't go to save your 16-bit file and pull your hair out because there's no JPEG option there. You also have size options. This image was shot with an 8 megapixel camera, and you can reduce the size, or you can increase it if you want. I'm going to leave it at 8 megapixels for now. That's fine for me. Alright, resolution is at 240. I'm going to leave it at 240. You can also choose to open this in Photoshop as a smart object. Now this has its distinct advantages, and it also has its disadvantages. Now, typically I don't open it as a smart object. If I want this to be a smart object so I can apply, the new smart filters and CS3 to it or something like that, I'll just convert it to a smart object within Photoshop. However, some people like to just open it in Photoshop as a smart object. But I must warn you, if you open this as a smart object and you're doing a lot of, let's say, model retouching, you're going to have to simply go through and rasterize all of your smart objects because you can't clone smart objects, you can't paint directly on them. There's all kinds of things you can't do that you're going to need to be able to do specifically with retouching, and really with a lot of photo retouching, that you can't do on a smart object. So it's just something to keep in mind. I am not going to check it off for now. Okay. So there we go. Workflow options out of the way. Those are our workflow options. We also have this little option to preview the image. Okay, you can see toggle current/original settings for controls in the current tab or panel. And that is simply this over here, the current tab or panel. So if I take this and I really make the image warm and really make it green, and then I hit preview, it's going to show me what the image looked like, before and after my little adjustment there, which is kind of wild. And I'm just going to hit Control Z and Control Alt or Control Option Z to, just Control Z, excuse me, to undo that. Going a little ahead of myself there. Alright, and I'm just going to choose Auto White Balance for this. I'm not going to get into quite what I'm doing here right now, but we'll look at it in just a second. Let's take a look at navigating around the image. I'm going to bring this image up to 100% size. So you can already tell you can zoom by simply using this drop-down menu, or the plus-minus buttons, or the zoom tool. Okay, just click a couple times. Okay, here I'm at 100%. Now, if I want to move around, hey, what's going on? There are no scroll bars. We need to use the hand tool, and you can either hit H, which is the hotkey for the hand tool, or you can do it the easy way and just hold spacebar for as long as you're using the hand tool. And when you let go of spacebar, it brings you back to whatever tool you were just using, which in that case was the zoom tool. I'm going to select Fit in View from the drop-down menu, and that just fits the image into the available space I have on screen, just like that. Alright, we also have the White Balance tool, and this White Balance tool theoretically is supposed to correct the white balance of your image, and what you have to do is just simply click on an area of your image that is supposed to be a neutral gray, basically an area of your image that has no color in it. So I'm going to choose that gray because I remember this monument was just gray. So there we go. We have just edited the white balance like so. We can see that the white balance is no longer auto, but it is custom. Alright, just like that, custom. Now we also have the color sampler tool, and you can click to place color sample points, and it gives you the RGB readout of that specific point. You can simply clear the samplers by clicking the Clear Samplers button. The thing I really like about the color sampler tool is not the fact that you can place points, but the fact that you have this live RGB readout. What do I mean by live RGB readout? Well, if you look over here at the histogram, we have RGB dash dash dash. No information is being showed there as we move around. But watch what happens when I have the color sampler tool and I just move over the image. You can see I'm getting a live RGB readout of what's going on there. You can see it happens with the color sampler tool. So I really like this, and obviously the ability to just drop those color samplers when you find a point. Okay, if you're looking for a certain color range, or just checking up on color in certain parts of your image, you got that live RGB readout happening. When you find what you want, bam, you click, and you've got your color sampler there. So that's really great. We also have the crop and straighten tools. Now the crop tool and the straighten tool are sort of the same thing, but not really the same thing. They are the same thing in the fact that, when you crop like this, that's it. I can't go in and straighten with the straighten tool now. I mean, if I do, it's just going to readjust my crop. And you can see it tilts my crop, but what it's doing is straightening my line or straightening my photo according to that line. When you draw a line with the straighten tool, it treats that line as horizon. So let me just get rid of this crop. How do you get rid of a crop? Well, with the crop tool selected, simply hit the escape key. It's the quickest and easiest way to get rid of a crop. You can also click on the drop down menu right there at the edge of crop and just hit the clear crop button, which is grayed out because there is no crop right now. But back to the straighten tool. The straighten tool, you can see I can just draw a line right across like here, and it's going to crop the image to straighten the entire thing based on that being a straight line. So the straighten tool can be very, very useful, especially if you do a lot of landscape photography, if you don't quite level your tripod all the way, whatever the reason may be. There's a whole ton of uses for the straighten tool, and it is really, really useful. One other thing you may have noticed is the crop tool doesn't get rid of all this excess image around the crop. And you might be thinking, what's going on? Well, that's good, actually, because you could close this dialog box down, hit done, and then come back to this a month later and realize, hey, whoops, I need all this to show too. And you can just come back in here and readjust it, hit done, and bam, you got the new image. You didn't get rid of any of that data, and when Photoshop or Camera Raw opens this in Photoshop, or when Camera Raw saves it out, or when Photoshop saves it out, it's just going to save this section here that's being cropped. So you don't have to worry about all this excess. All of that is simply being stored in that original Camera Raw file. So crop tool, very, very powerful tool. I use it all the time here in Camera Raw, and it's something that I highly recommend you start using. Okay, done talking about these tools. There also is the retouch tool and the red eye removal tool. We're not going to get into them right now. You can also rotate an image very quickly by just using the rotate, both counterclockwise and clockwise. You can see L and R for left and right are the hotkeys for those specific tools. Okay. Now, we have over here a histogram. At the top of the histogram are two pretty important buttons. We have the shadow clipping warning, which basically is going to color any areas with solid blue that are completely black. There's no detail in those areas, which is kind of an important thing when you're working with photography. You want as much detail as possible. Then we have the highlight clipping warning, which is basically saying, hey, this part of your image is too white. In order to get that to show up, I'm just going to jack the exposure all the way up. And you can see the entire sky turns red. That's because the entire sky is now solid white. If I shut off that clipping warning, you can see all of this extreme amount of white back there. I'm just going to set that back to 0 and turn off the clipping warning. Okay, you can see I can now bring it way up and I get no warning. So that's what that is. Also the histogram, which I think is a photographer's best friend as far as being eyes where you really can't see what's going on. If you know how to read a histogram, very, very effective and very, very useful. If you don't know how to read one, I suggest you start looking around and trying to learn how to read one. They're actually pretty simple, but I'm not going to get into it here because that would just consume more time. So we have adjusted the white balance of our image, and we're working here in the basic tab of all of these tabs. We have all these different tabs here. Let's stick with the basic tab for now, and we'll move on to some of these other tabs in just a minute. Okay, let's adjust the exposure. Let's bring the exposure up and up and up a little more like that. The exposure looks pretty good. All right, we're going to bring the fill light up, and the fill light's going to light up the building a little bit. Okay, you can see that. You're going to start to get a feel for what these sliders are really precisely going to do the more you use Camera Raw. All right, we're going to bring some more blacks back into the image. Now, bringing blacks in is typically going to also increase the contrast. I just want to check my shadows. You can see I've got quite a few shadows, so I want to reduce the blacks or maybe just put some more fill light in there just to get rid of some of those blacks. I don't want, a huge amount of no detail there in that part of my image. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, we can also increase the contrast. Just going to increase it a little bit and maybe even push the brightness up or down a little bit. I'm looking for my histogram to look nice and hilly here in the middle, just kind of like that. That's pretty good. You can see the sky here, the blue, is very light. So we're going to come over here to the next tab, which is the tone curve. Now, you have two ways of working the tone curve. Either point, which is probably the way you're used to working with the tone curve if you've worked with curves in Photoshop, where you just click and drag a point and make a change. I don't like that. By the way, in order to undo that, I just hit Control-Z. Control-Z, same thing as in Photoshop, to undo. You also have this parametric tone curve, which is basically you can make the highlights darker, the lights darker, which I'm doing because I want to darken up the sky. Maybe I'll make the lights a little lighter to keep those clouds bright. But then the darks I'm going to lighten up a little bit because that'll lighten the building up. And the shadows I'm also going to lighten up a little bit. So we basically have like this reversed curve going on, which is killing off some of that contrast. So I want to really decrease what I've done to the shadows and the darks as well. Maybe add a little bit more lightness to the darks, but don't go too crazy on it. So there we go. We still have a pretty contrasting image, and we've just adjusted the curve. Next up, the Detail tab. Here we can increase sharpening and also reduce noise. This is typically going to be the last thing you do in your workflow, especially if you're making major color changes, because if you make any kind of major color changes with the next tab, which is the Hue, Saturation, Lightness tab, you are going to notice a great deal of noise appearing. So you're going to want to come back here and either adjust color noise or luminance noise, depending on whether or not it is color or light noise. So, or really luminance covers the monochromatic noise, the noise that's not colored. The color noise covers the chromatic noise, the colored noise. So that's what that's all about. And obviously noise reduction, the more you want to reduce it, just slide those sliders up. On to the next tab, Hue, Saturation, Lightness, / Grayscale, because we can convert this image to a grayscale with a click of a button. There you go, grayscale. And I don't like the grayscale, so I'm going to take it back. Now, using Hue, Saturation, Lightness, you can really create some really neat grayscales. And I never use this convert to grayscale, by the way. I usually come in here to saturation and just desaturate each color individually. I gain much more control because then you can come over here into luminance and start playing with all the different color brightnesses and really, really produce some really nice black and white images. So we're not going to play with that right now. We're going to mess with the hue of the sky. We got blue, maybe if we want to make it more aqua, or to the point where it's green, or maybe we want to make it more blue. I'm going to add a little bit of aqua to it, and maybe oranges will make a little more orange, and the reds will make a little more magenta, just because I happen to remember this was sort of at sunset, and with that in mind, actually, I'm going to make the sky more blue. Blue, almost purple. Like that. Now, saturation, I'm going to saturate the sky a little more. And luminance, I'm going to make the sky a bit darker. Like that. It's really going to make this building pop off of the sky when we do that. I'm just going to brighten up the oranges, which are the reflection of the sun on the front of this monument is casting sort of an orange glow. So I'm just going to bring the orange up a little bit. Okay, next up, split toning. And this is basically you can add a hue and saturation values to both highlights and shadows and then play with the balance. And, hey, we'll just give the highlights some orange. Okay, and you can see as I push saturation up, it really starts to make a drastic effect. I don't quite want to do that. I'm going to push saturation somewhere around 30, 35, maybe 40. Something like that, just so we can start to see the orange in the clouds. And then shadows, we're going to push them over to blue, and we're going to start putting some blue back up there in the darker parts of the sky, as well as a touch of blue on the building. So there we go. We can also play with the balance here, and you can see that we're really getting some interesting effects. Maybe we'll keep that, just like that, balance at 32. All right, last tab we're going to go over is the Lens Correction tab, and this allows you to correct chromatic aberration. We're not going to get into that primarily because I don't have any here in this image, but we are going to touch on the vignetting. I do want to apply a vignette to this image, so I'm going to drag it toward the black. You can see we've got black on this end and white on this end. If we drag it toward white, we get a white vignette. If we drag it toward the black, we get a black one. So I'm going to drag it to the black, and you can increase the midpoint, which reduces the amount of vignetting you get, or you can decrease the midpoint, which increases the amount of vignetting you get. I'm going to leave it right here around the middle. Maybe increase it just a little bit to pull that vignette back a little bit. All right, you also have your camera calibration, which basically just allows you to get more accurate color. But again, we're not going to go over that. And we also have presets that we can set. So this is it. We have just edited our first image. I do, however, looking back, I'm going to select here and just hit the up arrow key to introduce one more black down there into the image. And there we go. We have this image set. Now, we can take a look at our preview before and after. Okay, quite a difference. You know, looking at it, I might actually want to make it a little bit brighter overall. Kind of like that. Just check our highlights to make sure we're not blowing anything out. And we're good. So there we go. This image is how I like it. We can go preview before and after again. And there are a couple things that we can do. Well, I'm going to hit done first. And what done is going to do is it's going to apply these changes to this camera raw file. But again, we can always come in here a day, a month, a year later, and all these settings will be just like this, and we can just mess with them and mess the image up, make it better, whatever we want to do. So hit done. And let's go back to camera raw, and you can see that the image has updated here inside of Bridge, not camera raw, Bridge. Now, I'm going to double click on this. And Bridge stays in the way. Just, minimize Bridge. Searching for the word there. Minimize. And here we go. We're back in camera raw. Now, let's say we just don't like this at all. We can... Well, I need to move this camera raw dialog box over, actually, to show you. We can... convert this image basically back to what we started with by just coming in here and hitting reset camera raw defaults or camera raw defaults. Just choose camera raw defaults. And this is, you know, what the image looked like out of the camera with camera raw defaults. Not particularly appealing. So in order to get back to what we were doing, well, actually, let's just say we made some other changes, decided we're going to mess with it, and we played around with it a little bit. We had black and white, increased the contrast, and we had that, but we didn't really like it. So how do we quickly get back to where we were? Well, you hold down the Alt key and you can just hit this reset button, and that resets you to where you were when you opened this camera raw image. You can see we're right back to where we were. Just Alt reset, and if I hit reset again, nothing happens because this is where we were. So how do we save this image? Well, from camera raw, we're discussing camera raw, so we're going to talk about how to save it from camera raw. Hit the save image button. It's that easy. Choose a destination. You can save it in the same location you got it from, or you can select a new folder. Then just name the file. Let's just name this mon for monument underscore img for image, and say 001 in case this were a series of images. And the file extension is going to be JPEG because we're going to save this out as a JPEG. Format, obviously, JPEG. And we'll up the quality to 12. We'll just give it maximum quality because it's, you know, it's a large photo. And then we just hit save. And bam, there we go. We come back over here. And we should have a JPEG file appearing any second. There we go. There's a JPEG file. Just appeared right there. So here's JPEG. Here's camera raw. We just got it right out of that camera raw image. Now we could take this camera raw image into Photoshop just by simply hitting open image. We open the image. Waiting. Blammo. Right here in Photoshop. And here in Photoshop we can do anything we want. We can come in here and adjust the levels, adjust, you know, anything. Just as if it were a normal image. But let me just quickly show you how to change this or convert this from a 16-bit image to an 8-bit image. It's actually very, very simple. First, if I come up to File, Save As, we get this folder where I'm going to save this. I can see I can save it as monument.psd. But I want to change the format, so I'm going to click this format drop-down menu. And down here you can see I'm very limited in what I can choose. You know, I've got a PDF file, a PNG file, TIFF, but no JPEG. There's no JPEG. So something's wrong. What's wrong? Well, it's a 16-bit image. So let's come here to mode, and you can see we have 16 bits per channel. So just check 8 bits per channel. Now that should be done after you finish all of your editing. Now come back, save as, and sure enough, there's JPEG. We can save it as JPEG now. So that's how you work with camera raw. I'm just going to close that document, Command or Control W, and I'm not going to save it. That is how you work, with camera raw in Photoshop or with Photoshop and Bridge and save your files out. Just a very basic overview of camera raw. Camera Raw 101. So I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can take your photography to the next level now using Camera Raw as an image editor. Have fun with it, and thanks for watching.